When my daughter-in-law stood up at my husband's will reading and said she was cutting me out of the $52 million estate, I didn't cry. I didn't shout, didn't faint, didn't even blink. I just sat there, perfectly still, while the lawyer's voice faded behind the roaring in my ears. I had spent 6 months sleeping in a hospital chair, holding Patrick's hand while he forgot how to walk. And now the woman he trusted most looked at me like I was a loose end she could snip clean. But then the lawyer laughed. A sharp, startled sound, small and quick, but it changed everything. In that single breath I knew something wasn't right. What had Patrick done before he died? And why did it suddenly feel like he was still here, whispering from beyond the grave? After the funeral, I stood alone in the garden, watching the last guests drive away. They left behind half-empty cups, damp folding chairs, and the smell of lilies turning sour in the afternoon sun. No one offered to help me clean up. No one asked if I had a ride home. Not even Rebecca. She had planned every second of that day, the flowers, the slideshow, even the brand of coffee. It was perfect in a way that made my skin crawl. Polished, sterile, lifeless. Patrick would have hated it. He used to say funerals should be messy. People should cry too loud, tell bad jokes, forget their umbrellas. But this one felt rehearsed, like I was watching a play, and everyone but me had the script. When I went back inside, Rebecca was already packing up the papers from the dining table. The air smelled like eucalyptus and grief. "We'll be moving forward with legal processing next week," she said without looking up. Her tone was crisp, clipped, professional. No warmth. No acknowledgement. Not one word about the nights I'd sat by his bedside, reading him the sports section because he missed his morning routine. Not one question about how I was holding up. Then she handed me a small box. "Patrick wanted you to have this," she said. Inside was a tie clip. Just a silver bar. No note. No explanation. Patrick had written letters his whole life. We had drawers full of them, tiny love notes, grocery lists, long rants about bad movies. But at the end all I got was a tie clip, one he barely wore. Rebecca smiled politely, then turned and walked away. Like the matter was settled. That night I sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold tea, and the tie clip sitting between my palms. The house was too quiet. His slippers were still by the door. His scent still hung in the hallway. But somehow I already didn't belong here. It felt like my name had been quietly erased, not just from the will, but from every memory that ever mattered. The next morning the email arrived. Subject line: Estate administration meeting scheduled. It wasn't even from Rebecca. It was from her assistant. No greeting, no condolences. Just a date, time, and location. Like a dentist appointment. I stared at the screen, wondering if humiliation could actually stop your heart. By Wednesday, I had convinced myself I was imagining things, that it would all make sense once I heard her explain it. But deep down, something heavy had already settled in my chest. When I arrived at her firm, the elevator opened into a marble hallway that smelled like money and printer ink. A young receptionist gave me a polished, condescending smile, like she'd already decided who I was. Someone outdated, unnecessary. Rebecca's conference room was all glass and steel. 7 people in black suits sat around a long table. Rebecca was at the head, posture perfect, hair pulled tight, voice smooth as glass. She didn't stand when I entered. Didn't say hello. Just gestured to a chair at the far end. I sat. No one looked at me. "As executor of the estate," Rebecca began, "I'll be walking everyone through the distribution of assets." Her voice was clean, clipped, efficient, the tone of someone who'd practiced sounding in control. She read out the list like inventory: stocks, trusts, commercial properties, the vineyard in Salem. Then she said it. That Patrick had transferred full control of the family trust to her 6 months before he died. My stomach turned. That couldn't be true. Patrick and I had managed that trust together for 20 years. But Rebecca didn't pause. Didn't even breathe between lies. She moved through the numbers, her voice steady, her hand sliding each folder closer to her side of the table. And then the associate asked it, the question that hung in the air like a blade. "What about Mrs. Sloane's share?" Rebecca didn't look up. "There are no remaining distributions assigned to her under the current filing." Just like that. Like reading a grocery item off a list. No eye contact. No emotion. No acknowledgement that I existed. I felt the blood rise to my face, but I stayed silent. Everyone else did too. No one questioned it. The meeting ended. Rebecca packed her folders with methodical precision, while I stood smoothing my coat, my dignity the only thing left intact. I walked out without looking back. Outside, the cold air hit my face like truth. I didn't cry. I couldn't. It wasn't sadness that filled me. It was clarity, sharp, chilling clarity. Rebecca hadn't just taken control of the estate. She had rewritten the story. And I had let her. For years, I'd mistaken her efficiency for love, her confidence for loyalty. But standing there in the parking lot, surrounded by strangers in black suits, I finally saw it. She wasn't protecting Patrick's legacy. She was building her own. When I got home, I didn't turn on the lights. The silence pressed against me like a living thing. Patrick's cane still leaned by the door. I hadn't moved it since the day he died. I opened the drawer in his study, half expecting nothing. Inside were receipts, pens, small bits of his life still lingering. And then, tucked under a ledger, a manila folder with no label. Inside were 3 pages. Patrick's handwriting, shaky but unmistakable. Rebecca wants me to update the will. Says it's for clarity. I asked her why now. She said it's just paperwork. I think she's being too careful. Haven't signed anything yet. Haven't told Marietta. She'd ask the questions I'm afraid of. My breath caught. The room went still. He had known. He had felt it. He didn't tell me, maybe to protect me, but he'd sensed it. The next page was a copy of the will, but not the one Rebecca showed in the meeting. My name was there, then crossed out in red pen. Next to it a note, discuss with Rebecca. The third page was a list of appointments, meetings with law firms, names I didn't recognize. All dated during his chemo sessions, times when Rebecca had handled things while I rested. I sat back in the chair, clutching the folder. The ceiling fan turned lazily above me, the air thick with betrayal. He tried to tell me in his own way. He just hadn't had time. By dawn I was still awake. The first light crept across the carpet, slow and gray. This wasn't grief anymore. It was war. Rebecca had stolen more than my husband's fortune. She had stolen his truth. And I was going to take it back, not with rage but with precision. I slipped the papers back into the folder and hid it under a stack of old magazines in the hallway closet. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in years. Daniel, I said softly when he answered. It's Marietta. I need your help. That was the moment everything changed. The moment I stopped being erased. The moment I decided to write the ending myself. Daniel met me the next afternoon at a small cafe on Elm Street, the kind of place where time didn't seem to move. The rain had just started, drizzling in soft gray sheets against the windows. The smell of old coffee and wet coats filled the air. He looked almost the same, older around the eyes maybe, but still that steady calmness that had always grounded Patrick. When he saw me, he stood up quickly, that old-fashioned gentleman reflex. Marietta, he said, and for a moment the way he said my name made me want to cry. I didn't. I slid into the booth across from him, my hands wrapped around a mug that was too hot to hold. I didn't bother with small talk. I just pulled the folder from my bag and set it on the table between us. He hesitated for half a second, then opened it. I watched his expression shift as he read. First confusion, then disbelief, then that slow tightening in his jaw that always meant something was very wrong. This isn't just careless, he said finally. He tapped the note in Patrick's handwriting. This is intentional. She changed the will, Marietta. Or at least she made sure someone did. His voice was calm, but there was a quiet anger beneath it. I stared at him, my throat dry. Can we prove it? He leaned back thinking. Not yet, but we can start by verifying the official records. If the will she read from doesn't match the one Patrick filed originally, then something's off, and that's not easy to cover up. I nodded, though my heart was racing. 4 years I'd lived a quiet life built on trust. Now I realized that trust could be used as a weapon. That night I barely slept. The rain kept tapping against the windows, like the world was trying to keep me awake. I sat at Patrick's desk until dawn, rereading the folder, tracing his handwriting with my fingertips. There was something haunting about those words. He'd known Rebecca was being too careful. He'd felt it in his bones. And yet he hadn't told me. Why? Was it to protect me? Or because he didn't want to believe what he saw? When the sky finally lightened, I made tea and stood by the window, watching the maple trees sway in the wind, the same ones Patrick planted 30 years ago. He used to say they'd outlive us both. Maybe they would. But I wasn't going to let silence be what he left behind. 2 days later, Daniel called. I need you to meet me tomorrow morning, he said. And Marietta, bring that folder again. His tone was clipped, purposeful. It scared me a little, but it also gave me strength. I needed someone who believed me. We met at his office, a narrow space filled with books, old coffee cups, and half-drawn blinds that let in strips of light. A woman was already there, sharp, composed, mid-50s with dark eyes that missed nothing. This is Lydia Velasquez, Daniel said. She's a probate litigation specialist. Lydia shook my hand firmly. Mrs. Sloan, I'm sorry for your loss. But I think your husband left you more than grief. Her voice was measured, careful. But there was something fierce behind it. She read the folder in silence. Every few seconds she underlined something, scribbled a note, circled a date. When she reached the last page, she sat back and exhaled slowly. Your daughter-in-law didn't just alter a will, she said. She orchestrated a transition, quietly, legally, so it looked natural. The word orchestrated stuck in my head. Rebecca hadn't just betrayed me. She'd composed it, like a song she'd been rehearsing for years. Lydia leaned forward. Tell me about the witnesses who signed the updated version. I frowned. I didn't know them. I'd never seen them before. Her eyebrow arched. That's what I was afraid of. Their names have shown up in other cases. Fake witnesses, unlicensed notaries paid to sign off on documents they never actually saw signed. Daniel swore softly under his breath. Lydia kept going, her pen tapping against the desk. This wasn't sloppy. This was crafted. And if we're right, there's a paper trail somewhere. She looked straight at me. We're going to find it. After I left the office, I drove home in silence. Every stoplight felt like a question I couldn't answer. How long had Rebecca planned this? Had she always seen me as an obstacle? The house was cold when I walked in. I went straight to the garage, a place I hadn't touched since Patrick passed. His scent still lingered there, tobacco, pine, and something faintly sweet. I opened the old filing cabinet he'd kept tucked under the workbench. The drawers groaned as I pulled them open. Inside were folders labeled neatly by year. Receipts, tax papers, investment notes. And then I found it, a file titled Revocable Living Trust Addendum, and signed, half finished. The section labeled Survivor Protection stopped me cold. My name was there, written clearly in Patrick's handwriting. In the margins he'd written notes. Healthcare, housing, legal support, all for Marietta. Next to that, another line, scribbled hastily in pencil. We talked about this. Rebecca said she'd handle it. I pressed my hand over the paper, feeling the faint indentation of his writing. He had wanted to take care of me. He had tried. I made a copy of the document and locked it in a small metal box along with the manila folder. Then I called Daniel. Tomorrow, he said. Bring everything. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and the cold wind curling around my ankles. The neighborhood was quiet. No lights on, no laughter. Just the rustle of leaves and the steady thud of my own heart. For years I had believed love meant trust, blind, endless, unconditional trust. But now I saw it differently. Sometimes love meant protecting the truth, even when the truth hurt. Even when it meant facing what you didn't want to see. The stars were faint that night, barely visible through the clouds. Patrick used to point at them and tell me their names like each one had a story. But now, all I could think was how far away they looked, and how close Rebecca had gotten without me noticing. The next morning I woke before sunrise. I took my time getting dressed, smoothing my gray dress, fixing my hair. Not for vanity, for clarity. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a widow anymore. I saw a woman preparing for battle. At Daniel's office, Lydia was already there, tapping her pen against a folder. I handed her the copy of the addendum. She read it silently, then nodded once. This helps. A lot. What happens now? I asked. We file a motion to preserve the estate assets, she said. If the court approves, Rebecca can't touch a cent until we finish investigating. It's not revenge, Marietta. It's protection. Her voice softened. You deserve that. I swallowed hard. It's not about money anymore, I whispered. It's about the truth. 3 days later, Lydia called me. Her tone was sharp, almost electric. The court approved it, she said. The estate is frozen. I stood there in my kitchen, staring at the sunlight spilling across the counter, and for the first time since Patrick's death, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not peace, not joy, power. Quiet, steady, rightful power. For years, Rebecca had written my story for me. But now, finally, the pen was back in my hand. And I wasn't finished writing yet. I didn't sleep the night Lydia called. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the glow from the streetlight cutting pale shapes across the room. The house creaked like it was breathing beside me, old wood shifting under the quiet. Patrick used to say the sounds were comforting, that they made the place feel alive. Now they just reminded me how empty everything had become. By morning, I felt the exhaustion deep in my bones. But under it was something else. A pulse of determination that refused to fade. Rebecca had taken my grief and turned it into paperwork, into strategy. But if she wanted a fight, I was ready to give her one. Daniel called early. His voice was steady, but there was a tension beneath it. I've been reviewing the county records, he said. The last will Rebecca file doesn't match the official archive number. There's a discrepancy. The original version, the one Patrick filed before his illness, it's gone. Gone. I repeated. He sighed. Marked as superseded, but with no record of who made the change. That shouldn't happen, Marietta. Not legally. Not quietly. A cold ache spread through my chest. Patrick's name, his will, his promise erased again. What does it mean? I asked. It means, Daniel said carefully, that someone tampered with the record. Someone inside the system or with access to it. This wasn't just Rebecca acting alone. She had help. I gripped the phone tighter. What do we do now? I've already brought Lydia in, he said. She's contacting a friend at the probate office. We'll need to file an inquiry. Quietly. Quietly. That word again. Everything about this had been quiet. The silence of sickness, the hush of betrayal, the sound of trust being broken behind closed doors. That afternoon, I sat at Patrick's desk again. The late sun spilled across the wood, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny ghosts. I opened his old planner, the one Rebecca hadn't thrown away yet. Page after page of appointments, doctor visits, financial meetings, tiny notes in pencil, always neat, always careful. And then one caught my eye. Tuesday, 10 a.m. Hal Givens. The name meant nothing to me at first. But then I remembered, he was a tax consultant Patrick had worked with years ago. I hadn't seen him since before the cancer. The entry was circled twice. And beneath it, written faintly in Patrick's shaky hand, ask about revisions. I felt my heart race. He'd known something was wrong and he'd tried to fix it. I called Daniel immediately. Does the name Hal Givens mean anything to you? He paused. Yes. He's legitimate. He used to work with a few estate clients we had. Why? I found his name in Patrick's planner. I think Patrick met with him while he was sick. Maybe about the will. Daniel's voice sharpened. I'll call him. 2 days passed before I heard back. The waiting felt like torture. Every tick of the clock a reminder that time had been stolen from me once already. When the phone finally rang, I nearly dropped it. It was Daniel. I spoke with Hal, he said. He remembers Patrick. My throat tightened. And he came in looking frail. Said he wanted to discuss trust protections for you, to make sure you'd be provided for. But he seemed hesitant, distracted. Kept saying Rebecca would take care of things. That sounds like him, I whispered. Hal offered to set up an independent review, just to make sure everything was clear. But Patrick never followed through. A week later, Rebecca called to cancel the appointment. The words hit like a punch. Rebecca canceled? Yes. Claimed Patrick no longer needed the service. Daniel hesitated. Hal still has his notes, Marietta. They show intent that Patrick had doubts that he wanted to ensure your protection. It's not proof, but it's something. I pressed my palm against the cool surface of the kitchen counter, trying to steady my breath. Thank you, I whispered. After we hung up, I stood there for a long time, staring out the window at the bare trees. Patrick had reached out for help. Rebecca had cut him off. And now she'd taken everything he meant to leave me. That evening I pulled out our old photo albums. Not to reminisce, I couldn't bear to. I was looking for patterns. For moments I might have missed. In photo after photo Rebecca was there, always in the background. Family holidays, birthdays, barbecues. Always smiling, always standing just close enough to be included, but never quite in the center. Hovering. Watching. Waiting. Had she been planning this even then? I closed the album slowly. The weight of it felt unbearable. Like it was filled not with memories, but with evidence. I thought about all the times Patrick had defended her. She's just trying to help, he'd said. She's good with numbers. You don't need to worry. But I should have. God, I should have. The next morning Daniel called again. His voice was urgent this time. We found something else, he said. The notary signatures on the updated will, both are fake. One belongs to a woman who's already been disbarred. The other doesn't exist. My stomach dropped. You mean? I mean Rebecca submitted a falsified document to probate court. And she's been moving funds around since Patrick's death. I felt dizzy. The world tilted just slightly, like I'd stepped onto unsteady ground. She can't do that, right? Not now with the freeze. No, Daniel said. But she's been trying. That's how we caught it. I exhaled, trembling. What happens next? He hesitated. Now we make it official. Lydia's preparing to file a fraud claim. But Marietta, you need to be ready. For what? For Rebecca to fight back. That night, I walked through the house in the dark. Every creak, every shadow felt like memory. I ran my fingers along the bookshelf where Patrick's favorite novels still sat, dog-eared and worn. In one of them I found a folded piece of paper tucked inside the back cover. It was a grocery list, written in his familiar handwriting. Apples, tea, laundry detergent. And at the bottom, barely visible, one final line. Remind Rebecca. Nothing changes without Marietta's approval. I sank to the floor. For the first time in weeks I cried. Not from weakness but from rage. Patrick had tried. He had left crumbs, hints, tiny pieces of the truth buried where she'd never think to look. And I had finally found one. When I told Daniel about the note the next morning, his voice shook with something like awe. Keep it safe, he said. It might be the key to proving intent, that Patrick never approved those changes. I locked the paper in the same box with the rest. The box was getting heavier. And so was I. I was no longer the woman sitting quietly at the end of the table, waiting for permission to speak. I was the woman holding the evidence that could unravel everything. And I was just getting started. When Lydia called me that Monday morning, her tone was clipped, urgent, precise, and calm in the way a surgeon's voice must sound before the first incision. We've got something, she said. Meet me at Daniel's office. And bring everything, every scrap, every note. I felt my pulse quicken. For the first time I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The drive downtown was a blur. The city seemed too bright, too loud, like it didn't understand that my entire world was trembling beneath the surface. When I reached Daniel's building, Lydia was already there, standing by the window with her phone pressed to her ear. She hung up the moment she saw me. Sit, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Her movements were sharp, deliberate. I just got confirmation. The probate clerk who handled Patrick's case retired 2 weeks ago. The one who took over. Her lips curved slightly. He's Rebecca's former colleague. I felt my stomach twist. You mean she planted someone? Lydia nodded slowly. Or paid them off. Daniel joined us, holding a folder thick with documents. He dropped it on the desk with a thud. These are the filings Rebecca submitted, digital copies, certified records, the whole lot. But look here. He pointed to a timestamp in the corner of one page. This is dated 3 days after Patrick died. I frowned. But she said the will had already been processed. Exactly, Lydia said. Meaning she either backdated the documents or inserted them after his death. Both are crimes. The words didn't hit all at once. They came in waves, sharp, cold, steady. Rebecca hadn't just lied. She'd forged, manipulated, buried. How long would something like this take? I asked quietly. Lydia's eyes softened. Months. Maybe longer. Which means she started this before he passed. Before he passed. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. I sat back, my chest tight. He was in the hospital by then. She was the one handling everything, the bills, the doctors, the mail. Daniel leaned forward. Marietta, I need you to tell me everything about those last few weeks. Who visited, what she said, what Patrick seemed worried about. Anything might matter. I hesitated, my mind reaching back through the fog of grief. Patrick's hand trembling as he tried to sign forms. Rebecca standing over him, smiling too sweetly. Her saying, "Don't worry, I'll make sure everything's taken care of." Everything. That night I couldn't get the image out of my head. Patrick's hand, weak, slow, moving across paper while she watched. Had he even known what he was signing? The next morning I went to the hospice. I told them I was collecting paperwork for legal review. The nurse at the desk, a kind woman named Evelyn, recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Sloane," she said softly, "I remember your husband. He was one of the good ones, always thanking the staff, even when he could barely talk." I smiled faintly. That sounds like him. Evelyn disappeared into the back room and returned with a slim file. "These are copies of the forms we have on record, medical directives, release forms, visitor logs." I flipped through them quickly, until one page made me stop cold. Witness, Rebecca Sloane. The date was 3 days before Patrick lost consciousness. Evelyn frowned when she saw my face. "Is something wrong?" I swallowed hard. "No. Just remembering." But inside I was shaking. Rebecca had been there, signing documents he couldn't possibly have understood. When I brought the file to Lydia, she stared at it for a long time. "This isn't just unethical," she said. "This could void the entire will. If we can prove Patrick wasn't of sound mind, or that she coerced him." "She did," I cut in. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. "She did." I saw it in his eyes. He was scared. Lydia nodded once. "Then we'll make that fear visible in court." 2 days later we met again. Lydia had tracked down the digital audit trail for the will. Every document filed electronically leaves fingerprints, metadata that can't lie. And there it was, an upload from Rebecca's home IP address. The timestamp 2:14 a.m. 2 nights after Patrick's death. I pressed my hand over my mouth. "She filed it herself?" "Yes," Daniel said grimly. "And then had it certified the next morning through her contact in the probate office." I stared at the glowing screen, my heart pounding. She hadn't even waited for the funeral. That night I sat on the porch again, watching the streetlights flicker through the fog. The world felt unreal, thin, like I could reach out and tear a hole through it if I wanted to. Rebecca had rewritten the end of my life, and she'd done it with the confidence of someone who believed she'd never be caught. I thought about calling her, screaming at her, demanding answers, but something stopped me. Anger wouldn't fix this. Truth would. Still, the silence between us was unbearable. So I wrote her a message. "Rebecca, we need to talk. Face to face. No lawyers. Just us." I hit send before I could change my mind. She replied 20 minutes later. "Tomorrow. Noon. At the house." The house. Our house. Patrick's house. The place that no longer felt like mine. I arrived early. The driveway looked the same. Trimmed hedges, clean steps. The faint scent of roses Patrick had planted for me the summer before he got sick. Rebecca's car was already parked in front. She opened the door before I could knock. Her hair was perfect, her lipstick flawless. "Marietta," she said, all polished politeness. "You look well." I didn't smile. Cut the act. Her expression didn't change. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do," I said quietly. "You forged his will. You took what wasn't yours. I have proof." For the first time her mask slipped. Just slightly, a flicker in her eyes, a tightening in her jaw. Then she laughed softly. "Proof?" I stepped closer. "You uploaded the documents from your house 2 days after Patrick died. You used fake witnesses. You canceled his meeting with Hal Givens. You think I wouldn't find out?" She tilted her head, studying me. "You've been busy. You underestimated me," I said. Her smile returned, colder this time. "You should have stayed quiet, Marietta. You had a comfortable life. I could have made sure you kept it." "I don't want comfort," I said. "I want the truth." She took a step closer, lowering her voice. You can't prove intent. You have fragments, suspicions. And you're too sentimental to destroy what's left of Patrick's reputation to expose me. I stared at her, stunned. You think this is about protecting him? She smiled, slow, poisonous. It always is, isn't it? You protecting him. Even now when he's gone. Her words sliced through me, clean and cruel. Before I could respond, she leaned in, her perfume sharp and suffocating. Patrick wanted me to handle things, she whispered. He trusted me more than he ever trusted you. I froze. The world tilted again, the way it does right before you faint. But I steadied myself. He trusted the wrong woman, I said quietly. And I turned and walked out before she could see me cry. Outside, the wind had picked up, scattering rose petals across the porch. For a long moment I stood there, watching them drift down the steps like fragments of something broken. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of her. Not of what she'd done. Because now I knew the truth, and soon the world would too. Still, as I drove away, one thought wouldn't leave me. How could she say Patrick trusted her more than me? Had he told her something I didn't know? The idea burrowed under my skin, sharp and cold. And when I got home that night, I realized, maybe Rebecca's cruelty wasn't just arrogance. Maybe it was confidence. Confidence that there was still something she hadn't lost. Something I hadn't yet found. And I was going to find it, even if it destroyed me. The morning after confronting Rebecca, I woke up with a headache that felt like it came from somewhere deeper than my skull. Like it was sitting inside my chest. The air was heavy, the kind that makes silence feel loud. I went to the kitchen, made coffee, and sat in the same chair Patrick used to read the paper in every morning. The sunlight hit his empty seat just right, and for a moment I almost saw him there, smiling, half awake, asking if we were out of sugar again. But then the illusion cracked, and all that was left was the cold imprint of absence. I had thought facing Rebecca would make me feel better. It didn't. If anything, it made things worse because now I knew just how certain she was. And confidence like that only came from someone holding a card they hadn't shown yet. By mid-afternoon, Daniel called. Lydia's ready to file, he said. The evidence is solid. Forged signatures, illegal filings, false witnesses. The motion will move fast once it hits the court. I nodded slowly. Good. He hesitated. There's something else. My stomach tightened. What is it? Rebecca's attorneys are claiming there's an addendum. A personal letter from Patrick that reaffirms his decision to transfer control to her. I froze. That's impossible. That's what I said, Daniel continued. But she's claiming she has the original, handwritten. It's not in the official record, but she's using it as leverage to stall the court order. She forged that too, I said automatically. She must have. Daniel sighed. We'll prove it. But Marietta, if it exists, we need to see it. If she introduces it before we're ready, it could slow everything down. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge until my fingers ached. She's rewriting his voice now, I whispered. He's not even here to defend himself, and she's still using him. That night, I went back into Patrick's study. The smell of him, tobacco and ink and cedarwood, was still faint in the air. I opened every drawer, every cabinet, looking for anything that might disprove her letter. Receipts, invoices, notes, but nothing new. Then I noticed something strange. A faint outline on the wall behind the bookshelf. The wood panel there was slightly misaligned, the paint uneven. Patrick had built this shelf himself years ago. He was meticulous. That misalignment wasn't a mistake. I dragged the ladder over and ran my fingers along the top edge. There, a hidden latch, small and old. I pressed it, and the panel clicked softly. Behind it was a narrow compartment filled with dust and one small wooden box. My breath caught. The box was plain, unmarked, just smooth oak with a brass latch. Inside were papers wrapped in a faded cloth. The first thing I saw was Patrick's handwriting. My hands trembled as I unfolded the top page. If you're reading this, Marietta, I didn't get the chance to explain everything. Rebecca has been pressing me to make changes. She says it's just to simplify things, but I can feel her steering me. I'm too tired to argue most days. I keep thinking I'll talk to you about it when I have the strength. If anything happens to me before I can, don't trust what she gives you. There's a copy of the truth here. My knees gave out. I sat down on the floor, clutching the page to my chest. There were more papers underneath, duplicates of bank documents, notes about the trust, and a small flash drive taped to the last page. Patrick had known. He had tried to protect me. And this was his voice, unaltered, unedited, untouched by Rebecca's lies. I called Daniel immediately. "Don't say anything to Rebecca," he said. His voice was tight with urgency. "Bring it all in the morning. Lydia's going to love this." But I couldn't sleep. I sat there in the study until the sky outside turned pale. The box lay open beside me, and for the first time since Patrick died, I didn't feel lost. I felt guided. Like he was still here, quietly leading me through the maze she'd built. The next morning, I drove to Daniel's office with the box on the passenger seat. The flash drive was old, one of those clunky silver ones Patrick used to store tax files on. Lydia plugged it into her laptop carefully, like it was made of glass. A folder popped open. Inside were audio files, emails, scanned documents, all with timestamps from the months before Patrick's death. She clicked on the first audio file. Patrick's voice filled the room. "Rebecca brought over the new drafts today. I told her I'd sign them when Marietta reviewed, but she said it wasn't necessary. Said it was too complicated for you right now." I don't like the way she said that. His voice was weak but steady. Each word landed like a blow. "I think she's hiding something. She says she's simplifying the trust, but why would she need new witnesses? And why are they her friends from the firm? I'm recording this because I want someone to know, in case something happens." The room was silent. Even Lydia's pen had stopped moving. When the file ended, Daniel looked at me. "This," he said quietly, "is the end of her case." But Lydia didn't smile. She leaned closer to the screen. "There's one more file." She clicked play. Patrick again, this time his tone lower, more hesitant. "Rebecca says she's worried about Marietta. That she's not coping well. She wants me to authorize power of attorney. Says she can manage the estate while I focus on recovery. I haven't agreed yet, but I think she might already have access to the accounts. I'm going to change the passwords tomorrow." The recording stopped abruptly. My hands went cold. He'd never changed those passwords. She must have intercepted him before he could. "Can we trace her access?" I asked. Lydia nodded. "With this data? Absolutely." When I got home that night, I sat in the quiet, letting the weight of it all sink in. Patrick hadn't been naive. He had seen the storm coming. And even as his body failed him, he tried to leave me a map. But I couldn't stop thinking about that one sentence. She wants me to authorize power of attorney. Had she done it anyway? Had she forged that too? I needed to know. At 11 p.m. I drove back to the hospice. The nurse on duty wasn't Evelyn this time. A younger woman scrolling through her phone. I told her I needed to review a patient's final authorization forms for a court case. She hesitated but finally led me to the back records room. I searched through the files until I found Patrick's chart. And there it was, the document I'd been afraid to find. Power of attorney. Patrick's name. Rebecca's signature. Only the handwriting wasn't his. I knew every curve, every loop of his letters. This one was wrong, slanted too far, rushed. I took a photo, then carefully slipped the file back. On my way out, the nurse said, "You know, I remember that night. Your daughter-in-law was here late. Said she was waiting for a signature." My chest tightened. "What time?" "After midnight, I think. She left in a hurry." After midnight. The same night Patrick's recording had stopped. I drove home gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white. Rebecca hadn't just forged his will. She had stolen his identity before he died. And now finally I had proof. When I pulled into my driveway, the motion light flicked on. For a moment I thought I saw a shadow move near the porch, just a flicker, fast and silent. I froze, staring at the empty steps. No one was there. But the door was slightly open. And on the kitchen counter, where I'd left nothing, sat a single silver tie clip. The same one Rebecca had given me after the funeral. Only now it was bent. Like someone had crushed it in their hand. The tie clip glimmered faintly under the kitchen light. Bent, twisted, wrong. For a long time I just stared at it. That tiny piece of silver had been the first thing Rebecca gave me after Patrick's funeral, the first symbol of what she thought she'd already taken. Now it sat there like a warning. Or maybe a message. My breath came shallow. I checked every lock, every window. Everything was shut tight. Then I noticed something else. The study door slightly open. I was certain I'd closed it. Inside, the box Patrick had left was gone. I called Daniel. It was nearly midnight. He answered on the second ring. Marietta. She was here, I whispered. Rebecca. She took it. The box. There was a pause, then his voice hardened. Stay where you are. I'll call the police. No, I said quickly. If she has the evidence, we can't risk her destroying it. She's desperate. Which means she's sloppy, he replied. Let her run. We already have the digital copies. The audio files, the scans, they're backed up on my server. She doesn't know that. I sank into the nearest chair. The tension in my chest broke into a shaky laugh. She thinks she won. Daniel's voice softened. She always thought she was smarter than everyone in the room. That's her weakness. Let her keep thinking that. The next morning, I woke to a text from Lydia. Court date confirmed. Wednesday. Emergency injunction hearing. Be ready. I reread the message 3 times before I let it sink in. The day had finally come. When I walked into the courthouse 2 days later, the air was cool, heavy with that faint scent of dust and coffee. Rebecca was already there, standing with her lawyer, calm, polished, and completely unbothered. She looked at me once, just long enough to let the corner of her mouth twitch upward. A predator's smile. The bailiff called us in. I took my seat beside Daniel and Lydia. The judge entered, sharp eyes, steel gray hair. No patience for theatrics. We began. Rebecca's attorney started first, his voice smooth as silk. He spoke of Patrick's clear intentions, of Rebecca's dedication, of my emotional instability following grief. I sat still, staring straight ahead, not giving him the satisfaction of a reaction. Then he produced the letter, the one Rebecca claimed Patrick had written. The handwriting looked eerily similar, but to me it screamed false. The curves were too clean, the lines too steady. Patrick had been too weak for that kind of perfection. Lydia stood, her voice crisp and calm. Your Honor, we have evidence to the contrary. She connected her laptop to the courtroom screen. The first audio file played. Patrick's voice, soft, tired but unmistakably real. Rebecca's been asking me to make changes. I told her I'd wait until Marietta reviewed them. She wasn't happy about that. The courtroom fell silent. The judge leaned forward, listening intently. Then Lydia played the second recording, the one where Patrick mentioned the power of attorney, the passwords, the manipulation. By the time it ended, Rebecca's face had lost all color. Her hand twitched just once before she forced it still. Lydia turned toward her. Mrs. Sloan, would you like to explain why your husband recorded statements contradicting the very documents you filed? Rebecca's lawyer tried to object, but the judge raised her hand. Sit down, counselor, she said sharply. I want to hear this. Rebecca swallowed. He was confused. He was on medication. You can't rely on recordings. Lydia interrupted smoothly. We can, Your Honor, when the metadata shows they were recorded days before the contested documents were filed. From his home computer. Using his personal account. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Lydia wasn't done. She lifted the printed photo I'd taken of the forged power of attorney. Your Honor, this signature was verified by 2 experts as not belonging to Mr. Sloan. In addition, the witness signatures belong to individuals who have been disbarred for document fraud. This was not confusion. It was coercion. Rebecca's composure cracked. You can't prove. Yes, we can, Lydia said. Because Patrick Sloan did. She clicked one last file. The screen filled with a scan of Patrick's handwritten note, the one from the hidden compartment. If anything happens to me before I can explain, don't trust what Rebecca gives you. There's a copy of the truth here. For a moment, even the judge didn't speak. The only sound in the room was the faint hum of the projector. Rebecca's lawyer leaned over to whisper something to her, but she brushed him off. Her jaw tightened. He wrote that months before. He didn't mean. The judge cut her off. Enough. Her voice was sharp, echoing through the chamber. Mrs. Sloan, this court finds substantial evidence of fraud, coercion, and intentional misrepresentation. Rebecca's eyes darted toward me, wild, desperate. But I didn't flinch. The judge continued. Effective immediately. All estate control is returned to Marietta Sloan. A criminal referral will be made to the district attorney's office. Rebecca's face drained. Her lawyer whispered something again, but she didn't seem to hear him. She just stared at me. Fury and disbelief tangled behind her eyes. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. The truth had spoken louder than either of us ever could. Outside the courthouse, the air felt lighter than it had in months. Daniel shook my hand. Lydia hugged me, brief, warm, professional. You did it, Lydia said. I looked at her. No, I said softly. He did. That evening I drove home alone. The sun was setting behind the hills, painting everything gold. When I opened the front door, the first thing I noticed was the faint scent of Patrick's aftershave. Just for a second, like the air itself had remembered him. I went to the study and sat at his desk. The tie clip was still there, bent, gleaming in the fading light. I picked it up gently, turning it over in my hand. There, etched faintly on the underside, was something I'd never seen before. 3 tiny letters scratched into the metal. H. I frowned. Then I realized. For God's honor. It was something Patrick used to say whenever he finished something difficult. A deal, a repair, a promise. I smiled through the tears. He had left me one last message. One final reminder that truth, no matter how buried, always finds its way back to the surface. 2 months later, I established the Sloan Foundation for Integrity, a legal fund to help families fight financial coercion and elder fraud. It was Patrick's money, now finally serving the purpose he intended. At the launch ceremony, I stood on stage holding that same tie clip in my palm. When the applause faded, I said simply, "This isn't about revenge. It's about remembering that love, when it's real, protects, even when we're gone." That night back home, I poured myself a cup of tea and opened the window. The wind rustled the maple trees outside, the ones Patrick planted 30 years ago. And for the first time since his death, the house didn't feel haunted. Felt alive again. Peaceful. I whispered into the quiet. I found it, Patrick. All of it. And for just a moment I could almost hear him answer. I knew you would, Mari.